Chile here with Sirius. Tell us, soul hour, soul day. Good time to call to Apollo with the sun. Beautiful in her joy in her ninth house on 23 degrees Gemini. And we are here conjoining at Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv, Israel. Um, as I am, of course, I cannot use camera in here during war, but as I'm observing basically what seems to be both aviation and military aviation sharing space. They are having constructions, but I just noticed the two. Gemini, okay. No filter, Gemini. um, Ascendant 20 degrees Libra. Midheaven 22 degrees Cancer. Midheaven is applying, an ascendant applying to the ascendant and midheaven of Israel. As I'm broadcasting, Sun in the ninth house, great time to honor Apollo. Apollo for removing tyranny and connecting with the heart and creativity. In the ninth house, on a global scale, in the last decan of Gemini. And that's the decan where we usually pick a side and stick with it. From this perspective, this is the setting for me to begin to broadcast the 2027 astrology. Now, one of the things as I was, first of all, before I was entering the airport, because I always look at the omens that arise as to the perspective from which I'm broadcasting. I was, of course, working on the same tradition that I did for 2026, and this is the airport broadcast. Why airport? Because when I talk about the world, I want to be at the place that would accentuate the world. Either at a place that would represent the first decan of Aries, world degree, which is also 0 degree Cancer, for example, or in the ninth house, in an airport or international convention, so that I'm closer to the point of prediction. And again, of course, if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. But for me, I just took the public train and made sure that I will be able to broadcast. As I'm traveling by train, I take the wrong train to the airport, and it would be 3 people that took the wrong train. One was waiting for an hour. He was coming from a city, and the funny thing is that he was offering accommodation, but as far as I understood, he was, I think, trying to hit on me. So, so this is important because I did not get it. I did not get it. And then we meet another lady that was taking the wrong train at the next stop. So there is something of with Mercury, and this morning there was something that I was reminded of regarding whether it's the civil war or two-state solutions, or and another thing that came up was regarding words. So, which was kind of like the manifestation or speaking the words that we do want, while keeping in mind that we set intention for with the energies as well to go in that route. Another issue was running into certain frictions that accentuated the differentiation of will, and how, and that in appeared to me in conjoining to Aquarius, which is a nervous system, a global nervous system a sign. And then when one asks about their own wish or their own will, then the rebellion is basically, if I think about the inconjunct between Cancer and Aquarius, is to know what do we actually want, and sometimes this runs into extreme frictions. But there is also a sharing of resources with Aquarius that can be quite extreme. Again, it's an air sign. So there's something quite overwhelming and about this sign. And I think a lot of the attempts to divide and unite and rebel are very reminding of world affairs and how that works on a life energy level, the unusualness, even regarding our own corporal consciousness. This is why Aquarius is so good with sharing resources, but then within a sharing resources, there's the question of people. If they think about the economy of the kibbutz or the moshav, a lot of people were longing for the privatization. And there was the intimate difficulties that this brings also stem from the need to differentiate the sovereign from the community, because it does sextile Aries, but opposes Leo. It's the need to not be over the top, but yet to individuate, and yet those over the top things are actually kind of interesting. So more things that came about were connections with lineages. I saw short about the Frisian Vikings, and the question is the questions of belonging, the questions of the desire to belong, the issues of exile, the desire to belong, and yet the issues of individuation. From that perspective, let's take a good look at 2027. A little bit of annual. From the annual perspective, let's see if it gives us lunations. We have solar eclipse. Or what is that? January. Full moon in Leo. 2 degrees Leo. And what is this S? I will see, but we'll begin with the solar eclipse on Aquarius, 17 degrees Aquarius, February 6, 2027. Solar eclipse, Sun Moon with Rahu, co-present with Pluto. So we have representations for all 3 decans of Aquarius, Jupiter is 22ing with Ketu. This is what I don't like for this eclipse, the Jupiter 22ing. Now, I did run into, for example, a case where a pet was missing and the chart was looking horrible. Like all the degrees that I don't want to see in the hour that I don't want to see. But then missing was Neptune and I used the manifestation and fortunately it worked. So somebody posted a subliminal for missing pets and it worked. Neptune is going to be 2 degrees Aries. So Ketu Jupiter, there is Mars there in Virgo, all occupying Magha. Ruler of Rao is in the second decan of Aries. First, second, and third decan of Aries, all affected by this eclipse. What it tells me: big role for revolutions, all the Aquarian archetypes. Everything that we can think about that is Aquarius. So we can think about worldly affairs. We can think about revolutionary leaders. We can think about big technology. We can think about, this is the Saturn that is outside of the frame. Unusual solutions to problems, but also unusual problems. Unusual problems with unusual solutions to problems. I was getting 2020 vision. So kind of like a global experimentative phase that affects humanity. Jupiter 22ing with Magha, we might be, it can take so many routes, but it seems like we're moving to an age of ideology. And with all the good, the bad, and the weird, okay? North Korea was also a revolutionary union between capitalism and socialism that ended up, and by the way, this is Rao Mars on Kim Jong-un Mars. And also the ability of, for example, North Korea to transform what we think about North Korea in the light of, let's say, COVID. It's kind of like, hey, North Korea is a tyrannical blah, 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 blah. Whoops! Davos. In fact, when I was almost 2 years later in Netherlands, there was somehow was an channeling experiment, and the first answer that I got was, this country is North Korea. But everywhere looked like North Korea around 2020. So here is the Aquarian perspective. During COVID, I had a friend that was a teacher, and she said it was so lovely to have groups of students that were like the education system in Finland, because there couldn't be a lot of students in one place. So spaciousness. Spaciousness was very important. Revolution was really accentuated. The awareness that, let's say, when I was in between houses, if a business was asking me to put on a mask, I would take something from. It's like they're asking me something that is costly. That it's not only that the mask costs. They are trying to put the regulation on me. I put the regulation on them. And and also the wealth redistribution. Um, Now, this is also a time where big revolutionary ideas will be executed. Not all of them will be around population control. There's a push, you know, for example, I just saw a person that lives in a place where the city of Pardes Chana, you said there's no missiles. It's kind of like Israeli Sedona. There are houses with yards, but it's very expensive. And he was actually looking to move to the city or to retire to the city. And so this meeting kind of like, the vision that every place has a house with a yard. And before the big peak of, let's say, the new hippies began, each and every person, people had a mansion with a yard, with 1 dunam of land. On the other hand, when we think about privatization versus conglomerates, and you say, what do you mean conglomerates? You mean communism? No, people need to read about the Moshav and Kibbutz because they need to understand the pitfall, because a lot of people will fall to that pitfall. And the children were separated from the parents. And again, I'm not saying that homeschooling is the best. I mean, there are always ups and downs in very controlling and isolating systems. There are certain issues, and also in very free. For example, everybody can take a hike into the wilderness. Will they sustain it? Will they survive it? And in Aquarius, we are frictional around nearly everything. And the more frictional we are, sometimes the more, I want to say binded, but definitely, okay, it is a fixed sign. Now, the squares are to the Taurus and Scorpio. So if I think about 2021, 2022, the nodes were beginning to move towards the Scorpio and Taurus. This is going to be squaring that. So I want us to think, what are the things that were frictional, that didn't meet an adjustment? For example, the housing issue. I did a video yesterday about does your house match your orgasm? What do I mean by that? Can people have orgasmic births in the housing? Because Uranus went all the way through Taurus without people having the space to actually, the physical space to connect with their bodies. Everybody was learning how to hold a jadeg or how to okay, but we actually didn't have the physical space, and that is both the societal but also the individual and yet um, to and this is something that goes against the grain of people that would allocate, let's say, a division of, all kinds of all kinds of stigmas that the orgasmic birthing prep completely annihilates. It's like a completely new way to think about everything. So there's a lot of things that went by with Taurus that the architectural wealth redistribution. For example, if I think about my meeting today with a person, I did not know if they're gay, they're straight, and because I was talking about, they said that they were from the north and there were bombings in the north, and I say, okay, why won't we have like a village or something that is allowing for, because we already have the transportation that is planes that are ecosystemic, they can go on land, at sea, underwater, and above the earth per every person. And this is also how people could adapt to people during emergencies. And this is also enough space per each person so people can have not only orgasmic birthing but also actual nervous system supportive birthing the next phase in life, rather than, or even when people have, let's say, recovery from crises. So Aquarius does denote about rejuvenating what is set in stone. Taurus is the question of currency. Aquarius is about wealth redistribution. Um, Scorpio, the deeply personal, psycho-occultistic, sexual, innerly politic. And Aquarius, the air. If you think about the water of the well and the air, they're not connected. Okay, we think about precipitation permeates to the water of the well. And the nonlinear connection in the air, in the weather, is also a part of the ecosystem of the water underground. Now, particularly with Pluto, where we can think about building in stone. People think about, oh, caves, underground. Wait a second. Houses built from stone in Jerusalem are also Pluto and Aquarius. It's not just building underground, but building above ground, something that we cave in. Because what is a house? It's basically, if we set the house in stone, and it's kind of like you get into a cave, but it's above ground. Caveman jokes later. The fact that we can make water from the air, for example, is the friction with the water of the well. If we collect water from the roof, then we lift the well above ground. That's water conservation. Then another thing is, and this is the friction with, wait a second, what about the underground water? So we need to have a location both to rejuvenate the underground water, which we do now. Another thing that is a square is the natural. I just saw how a financial breakdown led two farmers to abandon their farm and just let the animals roam. Within 2 decades and a half, the place became a thriving ecosystem. Best quality meat ever for those who eat meat. The natural agriculture that is of the ecosystem. Needless to say, quality of the air, and this is also rejuvenates what? The underground water. Aquarius is usually the industrialized. For example, Israel, I saw, I was actually trying to contact a company, a dairy company with that idea, and this is God. Somebody just threw the almost expired but not expired God cheese. It's and if I think about this idea versus the big Israeli agri-tech that have automated everything so much to have chicken farms that are completely automatic and so on and so forth. Now, of course, the criticism would be, well, this is cattle, next up humans. But then the antithetical question would be how to combine the technology and nature. For example, when we have an ecosystemic plane, of course, we need to mine the minerals. And by the way, if we dig underground within a little bunker within every house, then we have the minerals. And then more such spaces can be allocated in other regions. When we have the big agri-tech, the everything automated, this is first of all, it does provide food. It does provide, you know, is it the best quality food? Well, but it's kind of like, hey, that's food. That can be a problem with absorption of minerals. All the GMO, all the ailments that we know that are associated, because people think about how to feed the population and how to grow the population. They're basically trying to create and manage markets. The Chiron in Taurus, again here Chiron is still 26 degrees Aries. But the Chiron Taurus is going to square that Pluto. And we are probably going to have a little bit of thesis and antithesis between the hyper-industrialized and the rejuvenation of nature. Also in COVID, we had that. We had wild pigs roaming free in Haifa. People were basically, the people were in lockdown, but nature rejuvenated. Decrease in air pollution. But for that, we need for people to have more spacious dwellings. Saturn still in Aries, meaning that every single individual, the power system has to be inclusive of every single individual, and this is where there are going to be a lot of variants because there are attempts to include everybody, and the sovereignty how should I say that? People won't be able to go, oh, they're a snowflake, because they'll have to deal with a lot of snow. It is a Saturn sign. The weather management that we had with Saturn in his home sign is having its own sovereignty, because Saturn is sovereignty and Aries is sovereignty, and Saturn is ruling that stellium in Aquarius. Okay, when we manage the weather manages itself adaptively. We can intervene in chaos, but Uranus Gemini begins to pose a square to when we began to have the rise of chaos theory, which was the Pluto Venus conjunction in Virgo. It was the 1960s, which is why I mentioned the heart, the regulation of the heart, or the regulation, anything that regulates the nervous system would need adaptation to the squaring Uranian aspect. And of course, the opposition to Leo. Jupiter Ketu is, and Jupiter ruling Mercury that's closer to Rahu. There may be both letting go of, purging certain Apollonian figures or certain solar figures, and there will be also new old ones, new old leaders. It can be this time where people have a second connection or have a different role in. Way more global, and the way things work with Aquarius, they are not so distributed in a pyramidal structure. There is a movement between structures, which can actually be a good thing. And Saturn in Aries accentuate that has to include every single individual. With AI, for example, those things begin to become a reality that can facilitate a sextile between the power of artificial technology and the place of individual sovereignty in that, let's say, hive mind. It's a nervous system based model. Of course, it is opposing, let's say, Leo, which is the solar, the Aquarius is ideas, and Leo is visibility. So is the usual tension when we think about who has or whose idea is it versus the Aquarian undistributed, and then within the Aquarian there are kind of revolutionary leaders, and there's a lot, let's say, the ego issues are way more hidden. They're not so immediate, because Aquarius itself resists its own ego. This is why Sun is considered in detriment in the opposite sign. but that detriment can give us a lot of um, the qualities of being able to see the opposite side. So this is the solar eclipse, February 21. We already have a lunar eclipse in Virgo, 1 degree Virgo, closer to Ketu, Moon Mars, Mars on Regulus, Jupiter conjoining Ketu, Mercury retrograde with Rahu, Mercury retrograde on solar eclipse, Sun sextile in Uranus, Uranus 1 degree Gemini, lineages and trade, global trade, um, polarity. Now, eclipse with Mercury retrograde tells me that there are going to be, and this is where I saw that 3 people were taking the wrong train. One was waiting an hour, one a couple of minutes, and another one. And it's giving me that type of eclipse energy. This is going to be a worldwide Mercury retrograde related eclipse in Aquarius. And this is what my prediction is, that we're going to see what happens when the big tech is having a Mercury retrograde. What happens for AI when there's a Mercury retrograde? It's not the first eclipse we have it. We had it in Pisces. We had it in, I think, even in Aries. But with Aquarius, it's different. What happens when a contract that is supposed to populate a city is signed between a world conglomerate that is supposed to provide the public health, the schooling, the infrastructure, for example, right now there is a ban on Israel from the global medical organizations, and because of genocide. And we need a Palestinian comment on this, because Palestine is up next. And Palestine is up next to ask these questions of sovereignty in the face of, let's say, what happens when there's somebody decided there's a global pandemic. And it's global. Okay, what happens when it's a Mercury retrograde? Okay. There's an S-ton of automation going on. We see already with the airports. I think we had a Mercury retrograde co-present with Jupiter in one of the eclipses, and the aviation is like every other day an airport is closed. Now, on the one hand, rejuvenation of all the systems, all the structures, all the cities is taking place. On the other hand, it's also fascinating to see what happens when think about the MEU in the ATC and ATC to pilot. There was a trend of, in the aviation system, commercial flights, in the aviation system, there was a trend of basically the pilot and co-pilot giving them MEU on the emergency frequency to the control tower. Now, it's really funny, but that emergency frequency is actually so that when people actually have an emergency, they can use that frequency. It was occupied with news. And Mercury rules humor. Jupiter's sign was aviation. Now with Aquarius, it's probably going to be the world trade infrastructure. Now there can be some sort of Mars Ketu, Mars in Virgo, Mercury retrograde. Think about the automation for example, in Israel Palestine, we had sometimes a drone was there or a missile was there, and the entire country would get an alarm. The opposite was also was also the case. So, and that on a global scale, I mean, it is Mars. It's not a big tight conjunction with Pluto yet, but definitely, just like a human can make a mistake, also an AI can make a mistake. Mercury retrograde can give that kind of mistake. Saturn Aries, I believe it to be the infrastructure between the weapon and the orders and the technology, or the nervous system technology. Moon. Lunar, meaning it's going to affect the people. Jupiter, 20-degree Leo. Sun in Pisces. We might be, how should I say, the more philosophical, religious type of leadership might be taking a backseat, but also they can be retrieval of quite old beliefs about leadership. I know that there are groups that want to instill a king in Israel. Think about the philosopher king. This one could be an attempt to materialize the idea of the philosopher king. The big Aquarian vibes. And then the question is, what philosophy? Because Jupiter is in Leo. I'm not saying Jupiter is bad in Leo. It can be solar, where the king was representative of the solar sun gods, where the earth revolves around the sun, or the sun revolves around the earth, or the king as representative of the solar energy, or the solar god, sun god. And this will probably be antithetical to all kinds of, if you think about leaders as being the son of. So this is, yeah, I mean, and it's going to be in combination with technology and the Mercury retrograde. Not an easy one, not easy energies. July 18, 2027, we have lunar eclipse in Capricorn. Now, because that was a lunar eclipse, it looks like more of a people affected by the idea of such a king than actual installment of such a king. But it can be a polarity between those who were supportive of the king and those who were supportive of fraternities. Lunar eclipse, 25 degrees Capricorn. Saturn, already 27 degrees Aries. Sun, Procyon. Lunar eclipse, Sun, Procyon. The people at the opposite pole to Procyon. Very interesting combination of Moon in Aquarius and Saturn in Aries, because Aries is individuation and the new. Capricorn is the pyramidal structure, Moon ruling over the Sun. Sun Procyon is more about war and peace on a global scale. Chiron already in Taurus, Pluto, Lilith, and Rahu. I have to admit that this is a very weird combination because there are going to be the Pluto, Lilith, Rahu, and then there are going to be these traditional sovereign, whatever that means. A hierarchical traditional sovereign. What is it even? Like and then Lilith and Pluto in Aquarius. Because Aquarius is pyramidal, is ranks related. Or everybody being the head of but a pyramidal structure. And then there is the Lilith Pluto Rahu, which is actually more squaring Saturn. More squaring than sextiling. So we're coming out of the Saturn sextile Pluto to the Saturn square Pluto. Now the Saturn square Pluto is, if I think about it, I grew up with around Saturn square Pluto synastries since birth. And and that probably was preparation for the transit in Saturn square Pluto. It's a crisis of the core of structures. It's changes in the core of structures. Saturn is ruling Lilith and Pluto. You know what this can be? Lilith Pluto. There is something very, Lilith Pluto. Lilith can be the incubus or succubus if she is not honored. So my biggest advice is to not build on trying to subjugate people's sexual energy. I'm always looking at it from the perspective of Taurus, but Aries would assert its own sovereignty. And Saturn here would assert its sovereignty. It's kind of like it's going to take its sovereignty. So if somebody tries to overpower Lilith or even exile Lilith, it's going to be, how should I say that? If I think about Mariah Carey. And there was somebody that, I'm not going to say no names, somebody that complained about Mariah Carey mixing, sex work with music industry. Now here's the thing. Mariah Carey, if she was trafficked, then she was insisting on her music career. And when she was married to Tommy Mottola, she later escaped the apartment. In fact, the song Honey describes that very escape. It's kind of like, hey, somebody got away from being trafficked. And so it's also the kind, when I think about the type of, nervous system wise, the people that are, whenever people are trafficked, they can go missiles down. Things can go boom. Now, when I say that word, Adam and Eve was trafficking as per Lilith. So this is also where those that think to build on, let's say, places where men would go to, whether it's, they would be more dangerous than the battlefield for the people that think to be the client of that. And by the way, it's the interest of everyone in that situation. Because the friction is that Lilith is exiled. This is supposed to be Lilith exiled from heaven, or Lilith exiled from paradise, Deacon. But the friction is that she asserts her sovereignty. She exiled from to her own home. It's like, oh, is Lilith? I think, you know what I think about the power broker, and the power broker was. I first ran into the recommendation when I was looking at chart of Mark Rutte, and this was basically about the story of the building of New York. So there was this guy, Moses, and he got thrown off the stairs when he was applying for a job. Several years later, went and bought the city. So think about that Lilith that wanted to basically just not be subjugated. It's kind of like, and but that Lilith was like, here you're a hoe, here you're this, here you're that. Then she went and bought the city. Sorry. And she could destroy everything. Why? Now, when we think about it, the story of Moses, we hear about it with the women. The Me Too was around the women. We don't hear about it with the men. But it ain't like it's not the same story.
וואו, אתה רואה את הטוסט המנהיג? אתה רואה את המטוס המנהיג? לומי, אתה רואה? שמעון, אתה רואה?
Because in a city where there would be no place that is accommodating for the sovereign, the I am sexually sovereign, feminine, man or woman, destroying the entire place becomes not a big deal. Why? Because if capitalism was bubbling up to that point, that bubble can go boom, that city can go boom. And on that, there is the New York that we know today. The first, by the way, they were selling the rights to tell where the parks are because they were selling that to the gas stations. And to get that information, the gas stations could bid on. Yes, I actually went and listened to the book. I actually did my homework. Reclame voor Tesla. Like how to get yourself in the broadcast. There's an intelligence for it. Okay, here is a ricochet for Tesla. There's a religious guy that said he had a Tesla and he sold a Tesla because he could not cut off the internet. Now, you say, oh my God, this was like Amish. Well, there's another point to that. And that's the concept of privacy, although we don't need the actual, this particular internet to. And like I said, for people that are worried about surveillance, they probably should go and live in Aspen because their worries are going to be relieved. They're not excluded from privacy. It's just that there isn't any. So, August 2, 2027, solar eclipse in 9 degrees Leo. And this is the Pluto-Lilith eclipse, with Saturn still the same degree. Pluto-Lilith eclipse, nodes 11 degree. This is definitely when something can go boom, and with the Pluto, even atomic boom. Mars in Libra, middle decan of Libra, already Hasta Nakshatra. And this is where we balance the scale. Okay, if the first decan of Libra is about, let's say, reading the room. Okay, think about. I think about the first time I was invited to a Shabbat dinner when I was studying in university. I had a Bedouin skirt that I bought because I thought that it's stylish. Then I wear some white shirt and I looked like the stories about Hanaleh and the Shabbat. And then I started asking questions. The starting asking question is the second decan of Libra. And not only that, of course, it would be the kind of questions when the big person that understands everything about religion every day doesn't know to answer. Like, why do they put the challah in the salt? Is it for the minerals? Is it for... So the second decan of Libra is, after we've made the effort to do normal, we begin to express ourselves, we begin to ask questions, we begin to share around what our needs are. It's kind of, in the best of sense, it can be the deacon of goodwill, where we understand that if somebody is making a step forward, we make a step forward, and instead we pick which steps we can. But that deacon, we have made a step forward, and we see what steps are made forward towards us. This is as true to trade as it is to the justice system and diplomacy.